Welcome back to Tech, Tesla, and Trends. Tonight, I'm going to revisit the turning the electric grid on its head. And specifically, we're going to discuss microgrids and how the implementation of microgrids will impact the overall long-term change that's occurring within our current grid, like here in the United States or in Europe or other developed parts of the world, but more specifically how microgrids are going to radically change how Africa powers itself over the next decades as this exponential trend grows. Right now, it's at a small level, and people just don't see it. But it is occurring, and this is the nature of exponential curves. They're often missed early on and not seen. And I'll find a bit more information on that for you in a coming video, so that I can more clearly illustrate that. But for now, we're going to discuss how those microgrids play into this picture and their purpose in the overall coming revolution. Though it's not really a coming revolution, it's just an economic reality. Many people think that you have to mandate these sorts of changes to occur, and the reality is you do not. They are economically feasible in most instances today, if you're looking at it from a starting from scratch perspective and your development. So microgrids and their place in our society is an evolving conversation. They are localized, and they generate power right where people are in most instances. So that means, solar panels or wind turbines. There could be also micro hydro in that mix, or maybe a little geothermal. There's other ways that can occur, but in most instances we're looking at solar and wind. That's the standard SWB format, solar wind battery. That really is the nature of what a microgrid looks like in its current deployment. Oftentimes they're independent, but it is entirely possible for microgrids to be integrated in with larger existing power grids to help back them up. And those are often run by small independent operators, and those IPPs are IPOs, are useful to those grids as they maintain a small level of energy that's available and is backing up that whole system. Now, if it's just a solar or a wind farm, that's a bit of a problem. You have to have that battery included in that system for it to truly be a microgrid. Because without it, when the sun is down and the wind isn't blowing like it is here today, you would be in trouble. The battery is a critical component within those microgrids. So from a disruptive perspective, and much of what's going on with microgrids is very disruptive to the long-term, to the old way that power grids were built. In that you don't need large transmission lines. Now, those transmission lines can be utilized to feed power back into the rest of the grid from a microgrid. But in the instance of where that microgrid is supplying power, it's not necessary. And that's one of that particular component of the microgrid is very appealing to a lot of buildings that are seeking to be self-sufficient. We'll get into that a little bit later. This provides, that self-sufficiency helps provide for the power of that building. And in most instances, it allows them to run at essentially ignoring the existence of the grid. It's more there as a backup potential rather than the actual power source. And oftentimes those same developments will build in enough capacity so that they can begin to sell back to their local utilities. And that makes, enabling them to make money back. Then as you look at the overall, they can support the larger grid through those when they are integrated, and that helps to eliminate blackouts and brownouts. As Tesla has illustrated in California with their virtual power plant, as they've tied all of their power walls in the state of California together to help offset those particular struggles that California has because of the size and age of its grid. Microgrids, obviously, as I've mentioned, are part of that solar wind battery configuration. And as mentioned, when the sun is shining, solar is generating. And it's feeding into the battery. And same with wind blowing, feeding into the battery. When no source of generation is there, that battery is available for use. Actually, it's usually passed through that battery onto use, but that's a different conversation. As that works, or as it's passed along, if there's excess that's available, that can be sold back to whatever grid it's part of. And that's another option for a lot of these microgrids, is that they are looking at an opportunity to generate a small amount of revenue to offset the overall cost of its construction. So the third kind of point that I see with microgrids is that it frees people up to live wherever they want. And this is important. In today's world, there's not necessarily a need or a requirement even to live in a big city. With SpaceX's ability to deliver internet anywhere in the world, and that will become pretty much the standard norm over time, especially as their partnership with T-Mobile expands and they learn how to make it more than just a few text, or make it text that's across everywhere. It's going to change people's flexibility to live where they want, and that matters. If you can generate power that is sufficient for your building's needs and your life's requirements, you can live wherever you want. That is very appealing to a lot of people, especially those that are tired of living in a city and on top of other people. The overall, there's also that desire for zero emissions. That's a big item. A lot of people are very focused on that particular aspect, but it's important to realize that zero emission goals, like in the Paris Accord, you don't require a government to achieve them. Oftentimes, and more specifically in this, we're looking at the private industry that is actually driving these forward. If you take a look at what Tesla has accomplished over the last 18 years, is it government that's driven that, or is it the vision and goal of that Elon Musk put out there to bring the advent of sustainable energy at an earlier phase than what it would have been. I think you can make a very clear argument that without Tesla in the loop, a lot of the developments that are exploding today might not have been as large or as early in our overall development. Because if you look back at the documentation of what people were talking about, we're talking 2050s, 2060s, 2070s before some of these projects were envisioned being potentially viable before Tesla. Now, they are 2030s is where a lot of these are starting to look at. And by 2040, it's a done deal for most of these new buildings and developments to be at a net zero for their overall emissions and power generation capabilities. So there's a big, large amount of kudos that should be applied to Tesla in this regard and the vision of Elon Musk. Now, looking at from a self-sufficiency perspective, that isn't just for your green views. It is an economic process. And as you are more sustainable, you have a decreased overall cost. From a maintenance perspective, your operating costs go down, and that matters. So, again, I dismiss the idea that you have to have government involved in this. It is fundamentally the economy or the economics of projects that drive them forward. Yes, governments try to push things, but how many times have you looked at the economics of government projects where if government had been out of it, it would have occurred far cheaper, far more efficient, and been a much better and effective project? That's you can cite almost every government project that's occurred in the last 20, 30 years. It's the corruption and the wastefulness that has occurred at that government level of spending is unfortunately far too cliche in its application. And the fourth item that I see as far as microgrids is truly what's occurring in Africa. This really matters. Africa will be able to leapfrog where America or Europe or other parts of developed world are at, because they will be developed and built on a microgrid basis, that ideology, that overall concept, and that changes how those villages grow. It changes where people are at. It allows them to be able to develop what they're good at in those areas without the need to go through and build a giant transmission or to do what China's done and dam the Yangtze River there. It's just, as you look at what's necessary from a microgrid perspective, as it grows and overlaps itself, it is a long-term, more sustainable power generation process. And I really believe that as we watch this exponential curve of growth that will occur in the microgrid world for Africa, that we're going to have opportunities to applaud that. And again, I see the fingerprints of Tesla. There's companies like Zola that are doing just that, expanding into rural Rwanda and building out microgrids there. And Zola's got some investment capital from Tesla as well. And it's important to recognize that this is something that is occurring. Microgrids are here to stay. They're going to grow, and they're going to change the way that we utilize electricity. The power that flows is largely going to be generated locally in a sustainable fashion. And that changes how a lot of our cooperatives and large companies are going to have to, or large power companies are going to have to look at how they interact with their members and with their consumers. So it's the future is coming, and we need to prepare for that, especially those of us that are living in rural areas where the ability to put solar or wind facilities in in concert with our battery installation, it makes a lot of sense, and we can recognize our own small gains that way from a long-term sustainable perspective. Now, obviously, this is going to be continuing in its growth, and the developments and technologies. They're changing rapidly, and you have S curves upon S curves within this industry. The overall cost curves are dropping rapidly, and that is something that Tony Seba has made absolutely crystal clear in every one of his presentations on the overall cost of solar, wind, and battery, and the coming future of superpower. And again, take a look at the work of Tony Seba and Rethink X and many others within the industry. It absolutely is a wonderful world we live in, and microgrids are part of the future. So if you liked what you hear, go ahead and give me a like, and feel free to subscribe to the channel. I strive to output daily content of this nature, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking. What do you think I got wrong? What do you think I missed? What inspires you about the things that microgrids will bring our way? I'd love to hear that. Drop a comment. For now, have a good night. We'll talk to you later.